Business advisory firm BDO's Tom Stringer is heading the search.
We started out with several dozen potential locations, and we're really down to 5 states right now. Now that the lockdowns have started to end, we started our site visits, so actually getting out to the marketplace, stretching our legs, if you will, and kicking the tires on some buildings and some sites.
Stringer says the finalist states are Arizona, Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida, and Colorado. Gary Baumgart, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Horizon Properties can empathize with individual property owners during this trying time. The last thing you should worry about is collecting rent or sending a repairman to your property. With their web-hosted property management system, Horizon can reach out to tenants, vendors, and owners alike and maintain the current prohibition requirements. Let Horizon Properties take care of it all. Help flatten the curve by remaining safe at home. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792 or visit horizonpropertiesguam.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you. The Guam Visitors Bureau and Island Beautification Task Force invite you to come out and join the community on Saturday, June 27th, as we work together to beautify our island. Showtime is at 8 a.m. Let's take a moment to show our island pride, to get up and move towards building a better, safer Guam for our friends, families, and visitors. Learn how you can sign up for a beautification site or donate supplies at GuamVisitorsBureau.com and follow social media pages for updates. Special thanks to the stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Tumon are now open for takeout and free delivery services in selected locations. For more information, call 479-2652 or 3 or 969-2652. Open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comforts of your own home. They take your favorite local dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years. Tall Tales is also brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let's go straight to Zemi Ikotny. And here we go with the Daily News. And once again, the Daily News does not have a local editorial. They have a Paul Brandis, the founder and White House bureau chief of West Wing Reports. So it's at least it's not USA Today or Gannett News Service where boilerplate. They've just got another ghostwriter. And yesterday they had a ghostwriter, actually Stephen Hattori, a local guy, writing something on their editorial page. What a refreshing change, but they reverted back to the old ways today. That takes us to the Post, and the Post says federal deals on compact migration leave Guam burdened and shortchanged. U.S. Government Accountability Report Tuesday states Guam and Hawaii are shouldering the bulk of an influx in migrants from island nations, primarily the Federated States of Micronesia, that have a compact of free association with the United States. The national government essentially is allowing unrestricted entry of migrants from the compact nations into Guam, and then the sentence says, without providing adequate financial assistance to cope with the costs. The sentence should read, and doesn't provide adequate financial assistance to cope with the costs. In the most recent year, Guam made a report on the cost. The tab was $147 million, primarily for health care, public safety, and public education for regional migrants. In contrast, the federal government reimbursed only about 10 cents for every dollar of that amount. Guam has reported $1.2 billion in estimated compact impact costs from 2004 to 2017. The number of migrants from the Federated States, Marshall Islands, and Palau has increased by 68% from about 56,000 to 94,000 in 5 years through 2018, according to GAO reports. The report shows Guam is taking the greatest impact of the emigrations, now hosting about 18,900 migrants from the island nations. About 11% of Guam's population are migrants from the compact nations. Let me repeat that. About 11% of Guam's population is migrants from the compact nations. That's a lot of folks. Hawaii does have more compact migrants at 24,700, but with Hawaii's population of about 1.4 million, compact migrants make up only 1.7% of the state's population. While there have been tremendous contributions to the local economy from regional migrants who are gainfully employed, tremendous contributions? Are you aware of any contributions made by regional migrants, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm not sure, sir.
Well, you know, some of the places you go, like maybe gas stations or... No? You never see a regional migrant, huh?
Not really.
Not working, huh?
Not really, sir.
Any of the places you go. Okay, well, I was about to say I've seen some contributions, different, this construction project that's going on up in Andy South. I know that some of the people working there are regional migrants, and I have seen regional migrants working in stores and at gas stations and things like that. I haven't seen the tremendous contributions yet.
That's what I meant, sir.
Oh, tremendous contributions. Yeah. You know, like finding a cure for the Wuhan virus. Or,
yeah.
I mean, you got to go a long way before you say, that guy is making a tremendous contribution. That would be reserved for, doctors who do life-saving work, or police who catch arch criminals, or talk show hosts. Yeah, right. But I have, with all due respect to the compact migrants, I have not seen any tremendous contributions. So this is how you can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory here, editorial writer over at the Post. Like yesterday, you didn't even get into the ball game because you used the word normalcy. I look for a certain standard here when I read an editorial. I've made this analogy before. Maybe out in the news stories where you got to, where the reporter has to collect his information quickly and slap it all together and meet a deadline in order to get it into the paper. I would say that's maybe like carpentry work. You grab the wood and hammer and nails and you slap it together as fast as you can to get the structure built. But an editorial should be more like cabinet making. There shouldn't be any rough edges or misaligned joints or drawers that don't pull out properly. So when I see something like this, an exaggeration like this, while there may have been tremendous contributions to the local economy from the regional migrants who are gainfully no. In fact, I get my blue pencil out and mark a check there. It's also a fact that many of the regional migrants take a toll on public safety services, not to mention the toll they take on all of the concrete power poles that they joust with around the island. We only need to look at the police blotter and the crime cases to see how disproportionate regional migrant crimes are compared to crimes committed by other residents of the island. It's a difficult conversation to have, but it's one worth discussing. The United States cannot continue to reap the benefits of its compact agreements with the FSM, Palau, and the Marshall Islands, gaining access to the island nation's land, air, and sea for military defense purposes, while at the same time shifting the bulk of the burden of the migration on primarily a small community like Guam. Well, it's a good point. You know, what it amounts to is the United States has a foreign policy initiative. If those three countries are foreign countries, in the United States foreign policy is that it wants to keep those three countries close to us. It wants them to be our good friends as a bulwark against China coming in and taking over those countries in one way or another. We see that as a risk to our defense posture. So good foreign policy. But it is wrong for the United States to expect an island of 160,000 people to support its foreign policy. It's just not the way things are done. Now, I know another Joe gets really hot about the Federated States. He'd like to see them all become United States territories. I'm going to tell him before he even gets on the line, I don't think that's a very good idea, another Joe. But I will hear you out, as is my usual custom, another Joe.
So, you got me curious why you don't think it's a good idea for them to become fellow U.S. citizens in a new U.S. territory.
Well, for one reason, I don't think that they're in a situation where they would add anything to the country. I think there would be one more drain on the country.
Well, they already are, but as you say, through us, 166,000.
to this part of the country. But let's say that the FSM became a U.S. territory tomorrow. Do you think all of a sudden people from the FSM would say, well, we don't have to go to Guam anymore because FSM is now an unincorporated territory? No.
Actually, I think the playing field will be level, and we can go and start buying land and investing there as a U.S. territory and start making money there.
Only depending on the legislation that made the FSM a U.S. territory. You can't go to Saipan and buy land, another Joe, and it's a U.S. territory.
Yeah, that's so true to there, but like
it's
you said,
some truth. It's all true.
As you say, I'm optimistic on Kebab. I think if they're in a U.S. system, I think for the most part it's going to be fair and balanced.
Fair.
That's the whole theme to being American, right? And the American dream is for the most part the playing field is level, and if you work hard, you can make a good life. But so the thing that was brought to my attention on Kebab is the differentiating that's being done right now. The wording, of course, we know, you know, that the wording is very important. So in this compact negotiation process, right, the wording that they're using is the very special relationship between the U.S. and these COFA countries. Kebab, that sounds like my very special Chatmek.
You mean a Chakma?
Yeah. They say, oh, we're going to come in, we're going to give you housing, we're going to give you supplies and everything you need, right?
So elect mo na US kwa dot niya at Chakma na Federated States?
Yeah, so they're the other women. It's this very special relationship. I know. I say, hey, it's just a matter of time before the wife says, hey, what's the this thing called a ring? You know, usually that's have this thing called wedlock, and understanding and communication. And even though you have disagreements, right, you come back to the understanding of what you both committed to in your obligations. But no, the wording is our very special relationship. So instead of Uncle Sam, Uncle Bob, it's husband Sam, and the other woman.
So what you're saying is that we want to sleep with the Micronesia, with the FSM. We just don't want to take her home to mother.
Well, you can look at that. That's one way of explaining it. The other way, like I was saying, is we're the wife, right? And these COFA countries are the other women, plural.
Oh, I see.
And we're supposed to be good wives, like the 50 states and the other territories, and follow the rules of the relationship, and keep our mouths shut about the other women, because it might hurt the kids. Well, it's just a matter of time before the kids find out anyway, and then they say, "Hey, Mom, why did you let Dad have these other women and we don't know about them?" And then what about the kids? What? So talk about the wording is very special relationship, and say, hey, if that's the case, if they're not Tamek, then why can't we have a very special relationship with Uncle Sam too?
Well, we do have a very special relationship with Uncle Sam, and if you listen to Tall Tales, I've talked about that in innumerable occasions. Being an unincorporated territory is an extremely advantageous relationship with the 50 states, and the separatists, of course, would say no, that can't possibly be. But we have home rule. We have control over our own tax structure. We have the ability to abate what amounts to U.S. income tax that no place else under the American flag has. We control our own customs, yet we are entitled to U.S. diplomatic protection. We keep what it would be federal income tax anywhere else under the American flag. If I were the angel in It's a Wonderful Life, I would say, Territory of Guam, you really had a wonderful life.
Yeah, I think I forgot to leave out of the equation, Uncle Bob, is the context that we're not the only lover for the Tapmac. Okay, China is knocking on the door, right, when we're not around, and so that's the question is we put in context of we're a part, we're Uncle Sam or we're the husband, right? Are you gonna tolerate the other guy coming around?
Yeah, but all you got to do, another Joe, just take a look how China treats its other Achakmas. Yeah, you wouldn't want to have a relationship with China. Look how they treat their own people.
So, but it's also been said, Bob, that people are worried that China, right, might influence them to have weapons on their soil, and it will be pointing in our direction. And instead, they're that much closer than even North Korea.
That's why I pointed out at the beginning, another Joe, that this is the United States foreign policy. Dealing with the COFA states. So, and I think it's a sound foreign policy. I just don't see why we should have to pay so much to support foreign policy.
The good part of this is we're American citizens, so we can go to Congress and question all this. Say, hey, we noticed that China's building all these capital projects over there in these COFA countries. Are we? And we're spending money. In other words, we're turning we're turning our eyes the other way when we know this is happening, and we're letting these COFA countries play both sides. And the question is, at what point do we say, hey, do we still like this or we don't like this idea? And as U.S. citizens, and so the advantage we have is we are U.S. citizens. So the question next is, all these people in these jurisdictions, Guam, Hawaii, stateside, mainland USA, American Samoa, who have migrants from these COFA countries who are getting compact impact reimbursement, how do they feel about the idea that China might be using these island nations, right, who have a seat of the UN, to point weapons in their direction, in all of our directions. You know, as U.S. citizens, we have the right to ask these questions. Wouldn't you say, Uncle Bob?
I guess so, another Joe.
Hey, Uncle Bob, I take a lot of your time. Thanks a lot for letting me chime in, and I'll just keep listening.
Okay, another Joe. Well, there's another Joe. He was early today. I got to just take a minute here to answer a question that popped up on WhatsApp, on Facebook from Chris Costine, who says, I thought Saipan was a commonwealth. Well, there is a political entity called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. There's also an entity called the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the word Commonwealth doesn't really tell you much. The United States relationship with Commonwealth Northern Marianas is governed by Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Congress has the ability to make needful rules and regulations for the territory of the United States. Every one of the territories is just a tad different from every other one. And the difference with Saipan, with the Northern Marianas, is that Northern Marianas were not part of the United States, were not the product of conquest. They were not sovereign, but close to sovereign at the time that the United States acquired the Northern Marianas and negotiated a deal with the United States called a covenant. And that covenant has a lot to do with the relationship between the United States and the Northern Marianas. But Northern Marianas, you scrape the paint and varnish off of it, it is a territory. Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the same thing. There's very little difference between the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the other territories. But good question. I'm glad you raised it, Chris. Okay, so where was I here? Talking about the FSM. The United States cannot continue to reap the benefits of its compact agreements with the FSM, Palau, and Marshall Islands, gaining access to the island nation's air, sea, and for military purposes, while at the same time shifting the bulk of the burden of migration to primarily to a small community like Guam. And then we've got the statistic here: 11% of our population is made up of people from the Federated States or from the freely associated states. This challenge has been unfolding on Guam, and the island and its residents have been left to cope pretty much on our own. The federal government continues to provide Guam with a token of funding, a measly $14 million a year or so for Compact Impact. This year it's only going to be $7 million. We talked about that yesterday. The federal government also needs to enforce the regulation on, quote, public charges, like other migrants from non-compact nations are subjected to. If regional migrants are placing a burden on the community by committing crimes and relying on various forms of government assistance, that would be, according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security rule, a reason for migrants to be refused entry. Part of the problem is that the federal government's enforcement on this aspect seems to be non-existent on Guam. The reason that it seemed to be non-existent on Guam, you know what that is, Real Joe Cruz?
Why, sir?
Because it is non-existent.
Okay.
It never happens. The feds can't even quickly deport compact migrants who have been convicted of deplorable crimes. Another problem is there has been a lack of effort on the part of local elected officials to call out the federal government on its shortcomings and its obligations to make Guam whole. Where's the Guam delegate on all of this? The federal government cannot pretend to look the other way while the economic conditions on Guam continue to deteriorate because of certain burdens caused by regional migrants who are not contributing members of our community. It's not a whole lot to ask that the federal government do its part. It's not a whole lot to ask people to leave our home if they choose not to be contributing members of our community and would rather add various types of burdens on already struggling Guam. So I think the Post has got it here. I come back to this right after this short break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon, or call 646-1463.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, back again, Tall Tales, just finishing up Jimmy Cotney. I've got the Post editorial in front of me. I've just finished kind of dissecting it. I found one bad part of it, but it's going to be forgiven. I've got to compliment the Post. They wrote a good editorial on on a topic that really needs to be discussed, that nowadays would be seen as politically incorrect, because we're supposed to, in these days of Black Lives Matter, to talk in terms of people breaking the law. Yeah, no. You don't just talk about people breaking the law. You have to talk about the oppression they've been placed under, and what could be done so that they wouldn't want to break the law. So it took a certain amount of guts to come up with this. I suspect that there will be some people who would say, "Oh, I thought the Post was okay, but now they've come down on Micronesians, and that's just not right. It's racist." And, of course, once somebody calls you a racist, Real Joe Cruz, that's pretty much
You're marked, sir.
You are marked forever. You cannot overcome that. So I'm going to mark the Post. I'm going to give the Post what every newspaper editor in the country is striving for, the coveted blue star. Congratulations, Post. And let's see, I suppose when Jimmy hears the word Micronesian, he thinks that means call Tall Tales. Right, Jimmy?
No, I just have a question.
Okay, fire.
As far as I understand, all these immigrants from Micronesia, they should be either have a job, or they should be a student, or they shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm not right, but
the only thing that's where you're not right there, the folks coming from Micronesia are not immigrants; they're habitual residents. But other than that, you're right. Yeah, they're supposed to be coming here to work or go to school, and I think maybe even for medical care. but not to come here and grab a six-pack and sit under a tree. That's not why they're here.
You say habitual residents?
Uh-huh.
I say habitual criminals.
Well, you're Jimmy, and that's the difference between us. I'm not Jimmy. But that's the technical term, Jimmy. That's the term in the statute. They are habitual residents.
So what about all the Micronesians on Guam that don't have a job and are not in school and steal and rape and swing machetes? Why don't they just send them back?
Well, who is the they that's going to do the sending, Jimmy?
Gov Guam.
Gov Guam can't do that.
Why not?
Well, matters of immigration are addressed to agencies of the national government, not the territorial government. And that's kind of what the editorial said, that folks from the freely associated states who aren't working and commit crimes should be sent back. But the national government has, as far as I know, since we've had the covenants of, or the compacts of free association, I don't know that the national government has ever deported anyone who hasn't been convicted of a crime and imprisoned.
Calvo got rid of a few of them.
Well, you know, once again, an explanation. What Calvo did a couple of times was he had people from the FSM that were sentenced to terms imprisonment. He commuted the terms, the prison terms, to time served, and he said, I will parole you on the condition that we will send you back to where you came from and you can never come back to Guam again. He did that about 3 times and then figured out that instead of doing that, he could commute the sentences and let the immigration folks do the deportation.
Yes.
I have a little trouble with that myself, Jimmy. I don't know that I'm real crazy about a situation where someone is sentenced to a crime where he should be spending 25 years in prison, and he's paroled because he's going to leave the island.
Yep.
Yeah, he sounds. Your cough's getting better, Jimmy. You know that?
Well,
you've been practicing a lot, right?
Something's getting better.
Yeah.
And something's better than nothing.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, anyway, I'm still not clear. Okay, the Micronesians come to Guam, and the law says they got to have a job, or they got to be in. They need urgent medical care, or they got to be in school. And if you look around, you'll see a lot of Micronesians that don't have a job, are not in school, and the only medical care they get is to have 3 babies at GMH. So I still don't understand why don't they just...
The answer to your question is, who is they?
Gov Guam.
Gov Guam doesn't have the ability to do that, Jimmy.
Who does?
The same entity that I mentioned before, the immigration, what is it?
INS?
It used to be called INS.
ICE.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Yes,
yeah.
ICE. Well, why don't they do it then?
You're asking the wrong guy, Jimmy. And that's exactly the point of the editorial. The editorial says the national government's letting us down because they should be enforcing that.
Yes, I agree. And I'm happy to hear you talk about it. But, okay, that's the problem. But what's the solution?
Well, the Daily News thinks the solution is that for our delegate to Congress to be pounding on the table and make things happen along those lines.
Well, anyway, I'm a little bit clearer now that you've answered my questions. And it's like a catch-22. You can do this, but you can't do that. You can do this, but you got to do this for circular reasoning. Anyway, thanks. I won't bother you anymore.
All right, Jimmy. It's always fun to talk to you. Well, that's our friend Jimmy. So the Post gathered in another blue star, and that takes the Post up to 204 to 57 for the Daily News, and 3 for Candid. Candid hasn't written any editorials lately, but I think Helen Middlebrook has gotten 2 blue stars.
I think so, sir.
Yeah.
Even Jerry Roberts got 1 blue star.
Even Jerry Roberts
said he was going to frame it and put it up on his wall.
It would seem appropriate.
It is, sir.
Yeah, it would seem to be appropriate. Or maybe put it up on the wall here in the studio to remind him of his greatness when he comes in here to do a show.
Good idea, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so then we pick up the card, and we start out with Troy versus Janela, which has an interesting twist to it today. I've got Tina and her never-ending search for emergencies to public health or safety. I've got Joe San Augustine versus Phil Tydenko. I've got Alito versus Gorsuch. And where's the one I was really looking for? Oh, yeah. Forgot to put that in the calendar. Oh, no, wait. I've got versus United. Oh, I should say her whole name, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I almost thought we had some kind of static in the line, sir.
Yeah, Kelly Marsh Titano versus United. Joe San Augustine versus Phil Tydenko. Alito versus Gorsuch. That's probably as far as I'm going to get today. Well, you remember Janela, as you were, Troy versus Janela. Janela, the button man, pushed the button to mute reporters. When she unmuted them, she cut them off in mid-question. The lieutenant governor told her to apologize, told Carlo Branch to apologize. Carlo apologized. Janela never did. Troy was on her for several days. And on the lieutenant, hey, when's Janela going to apologize? And then we finally had the Crystal Paco explanation, and Troy stopped bugging Janela. Now, today, I mean, that's the story behind Troy versus Janela. Today, the card has been reversed. It is now Janela versus Troy. Or the subtitle, Janela's Revenge. And revenge is exactly the right word.
Yes, sir.
In more ways than one.
Yes, sir, more than one.
And here's the story that ran in this morning's Post. Lawsuit alleges revenge pornography.
Oh.
Yeah.
Has a little bit of that.
Yeah. And I read the story 4 times to see if I could detect the 19th floor in there anywhere.
Yeah.
It's
kind of there. So.
Well, I'm just going to hang on that one. Yeah. Janela Buhain Carrera, the governor's director of communications, has filed a civil lawsuit in Superior Court seeking an injunction and damages against several defendants, to include Troy Torres and his company, Candid, Inc. Carrera is represented by attorney Vanessa Williams, who filed a complaint on her behalf on June 1. She alleged on May 12, the defendants intentionally advertised and offered and intentionally caused others to display and distribute images of her nude and having sex. Whoa.
You okay, Bob?
This is a family show, you know.
That's right, sir.
Parents, if your kids are watching TV right now, tell them to go outside and play.
How many times did you read it again, sir? 4 times?
4 times,
okay,
yes.
sir. It's all right.
Yeah, okay.
I know, sir. I know.
Yeah, so she alleged that on May 12th, the defendants intentionally advertised and offered and intentionally caused others to display and distribute images of her nude and having sex, adding that she has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Yeah, I'm surprised that, that this is getting the press. It seems to me that this wouldn't be in the newspaper. Know why, Real Joe Cruz?
Why, sir?
It's a personnel matter.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow.
Shame on them. How dare they?
Yeah. The video was posted on social media that same day, where Carrera alleged Torres told viewers where they could go to watch it. Defendants advertised and offered the images with intent to harm, harass, intimidate, threaten, and coerce Carrera, the complaint states. The complaint cites Public Law 33-171, which makes it unlawful to distribute images of persons depicted in a state of nudity or engaged in sexual activities, otherwise known as revenge pornography, with the intent to cause harm. You know, when I see this thing about pictures of in the state, people in a state of nudity, I just got to give you a warning about when you're online, Real Joe Cruz.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. If you ever get an email that says, click here for a picture of Nancy Pelosi in the nude.
Yes, sir.
Don't even think about doing it.
Oh, why not, sir?
Turn your computer off and unplug it. Don't even think about it, doing it.
I'm tempted, though, sir.
Yeah, well,
There's temptations out there.
Don't
sir.
do it. Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Why?
It is.
Oh. No, thank you, then, sir.
Yeah, right.
Straight to the trash bin.
Get yourself a hammer and smash the screen.
You got it,
if
sir.
You can't do anything else, right? All right. Carrera also alleged the defendants posted one of the nude photos on the Candid Facebook page on May 27. Her attorney issued Torres a cease and desist letter, which he allegedly refused during a separate video recording posted online, documents state. The complaint states the defendant's negligence caused Carrera to suffer severe emotional distress, including humiliation, mental anguish, and anxiety. Documents also state Carrera suffered general damages in an amount to be determined at trial. Carrera is entitled to an award of punitive damages from defendants, and each of them in an amount to be proven at trial and sufficient to punish, penalize, and deter defendants from engaging in such conduct in the future. Documents state. Carrera asked the court for a temporary restraining order and a jury trial to address the allegations. The case went before Judge Elise Iriarte on June 12. However, she has since disqualified herself from the case, according to court records. A new judge has not yet been assigned to the case. Well, this is, shall I say, interesting. I wonder what the traffic to Candid News was after this story ran in the newspaper. I imagine everybody and his brother went to I got to check Candid News, see what they got today. So just reading the story, I'm curious about a couple of things. One, I'm curious as to why Elise Iriarte disqualified herself. Just curious. And then the second thing, who would the other defendants be? The first paragraph says, seeking injunction and damages against several defendants, including Troy Torres and Candid Inc. So I'm very curious to find out who the other defendants are. So that's the news story. I have public law, what was the number of it here? 33-171 in front of me. And it is a criminal statute. Now, Janella, with Vanessa Williams serving as their attorney, is bringing a civil suit. She didn't obviously has not, at least at yet, made a criminal complaint. So it's a civil suit. It's got the obligatory definitional section. And it's unlawful for a person to intentionally, I got a break coming up here. I'll come back to the statute after the break.
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña is open for dine-in, takeout, and delivery services from Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call them at 479-2652. Get your Mescla fix today.
So, getting pretty close to that big halftime show here, but this is the first section. This is 9 GCA section 28.102. It is unlawful for a person to intentionally disclose or intentionally cause another person to disclose, including disclosing by electronic means, an image of another person who is identifiable from the image himself or information displayed in connection with the image, or otherwise engaging in revenge pornography. And the definition of revenge pornography, all right, the person in the image is depicted in a state of nudity or is engaged in sexual conduct. The depicted person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Evidence that a person has sent an image to another person, including through use of an electronic device, does not on its own remove the person's reasonable expectation of privacy for that image. The image is disclosed with the intent to harm, harass, intimidate, threaten, or coerce the depicted person. So that's kind of the nuts of the statute here. There's a definitional section. The penalty section is first offense is a misdemeanor and a fine of $1,000 or imprisonment of no more than a year or both. So it's a relatively light penalty. But of course, this is not what the article says. Is that Janella did not file a complaint with the police. She's not looking for a criminal case to be opened. She has filed a civil case, and there is a doctrine called actionable per se, as I recall, that says that if a person engages in that which is violative of a criminal statute, the victim of that particular conduct does not have to show damages, that the law presumes damages. So it's going to be an interesting civil case. The fact that the criminal case, the fact that what Troy and others allegedly did violates the criminal statute doesn't necessarily mean that the civil case is going to be a slam dunk. So it's going to be pretty interesting to follow that as it spins along. Collateral issues. Janella is the spokesperson. She is a director of communications for the Leon Guerrero administration. Obviously, this is not good news for the Leon Guerrero administration. It's a Tony Babauta writ large, except in this case, the Janella is not the one who is alleged to have committed misconduct. But of course, it kind of depends on how you define misconduct. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the Leon Guerrero administration is going to say, we want to thank Janella for her service to the administration. She's performed very well. She's leaving for personal reasons now, and we wish her nothing but the best. Or Janella has health issues, and she's going to have to leave her position with the administration. Or everybody's innocent until proven guilty. We're going to stand behind Janella. She was the wrong person. She didn't do anything wrong. We're standing behind Janella. Or if they turn it over to the communications shop at the governor's office and let their two communications professionals fashion the message. Now, that would mean that the services of Crystal Paco, also known as Crystal Paco San Augustine, who fashioned the rejoinder as to why Janella hadn't apologized, in coordination with the director of communications for the administration, would then come up with the media posture for the Leon Guerrero administration. And of course, the director of communications is none other than Janella Carrera. Okay, it's just about time for that big halftime show that we all look forward to. I'm going to take a call from Jimmy, and then we'll go to the halftime show. Hello, Jimmy.
Just very short question. What's the link to that video you've been talking about? Hello?
Yeah, I didn't quite catch that, Jimmy.
What's the link to that video you've been talking about?
You're looking for the link, huh? Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Did it evaporate?
I'm going to protect myself here, Jimmy. I don't have the link. I will not look for the link. If for some reason it fell into my lap, I would not give it to anyone else.
You wouldn't do anything else with it? If it was in your lap?
I would not.
Okay.
Attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
It is a mystery.
Okay, Jimmy?
It just vanishes onto the 19th floor?
Well, there we go. Time for that big halftime show.
So, sir, imagine everybody that got that video and shared it with 10 other people, and then those 10 other people shared it with those 10 other people.
Yeah.
Are all those people in trouble, like thousands of people?
Arguably.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So she can get money from each and every one of them?
I don't think that it necessarily has to be a Oh, you mean could she?
Yeah.
Arguably. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another proposal. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Senate Republicans will introduce their version of police reform legislation today.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell warned Democrats they should not dare trying to block or filibuster this effort.
We're in the process of making a law, not just making a point.
Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer says Republicans must be bold.
Now is the moment for real, lasting, comprehensive change. We cannot merely make some changes around the margins.
On Capitol Hill, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
President Trump yesterday signed an executive order on policing.
Reducing crime and raising standards are not opposite goals. They are not mutually exclusive. They work together.
The order calls for the development of a national database on police misconduct, less lethal means of force, and incorporating social workers into policing efforts to help deal with mental health issues, drug abuse, and homelessness. Los Angeles already considering such a program. Unarmed social workers, instead of LAPD officers, would respond to nonviolent police calls under a proposal from some city council members to develop a crisis response model to use teams of trained professionals. Critics say having armed police at certain situations can make them more dangerous. The president also met privately with family members of some recent victims of violence.
It was a very emotional, very touching moment, and this president wanted me to share with you that he wanted to share with these families. I love you. I hear you. I want to help you. He communicated that directly.
White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. After another update on Wall Street Tuesday, Asian stock markets closing Wednesday mixed. Dow futures are trading just slightly higher. Tuesday, the Dow gained 526 points. NASDAQ was up 169. The S&P 500 closed 58 points higher. America is listening to Fox News.
Hofity, this is Kayla from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
This Father's Day, be one of 7 lucky winners of Circle K's Ultimate Father's Day Package. Get a case of tomahawk steak, a bottle of whiskey, a case of beer, and a Bacchus beer bag. That's a $300 value. Purchase $25 or more in fuel, or any 6-pack or more of Miller Lite, Coors Light, or Blue Moon to receive an entry form. Tune in to The Ray Gibson Show on The Point for more ways to win. Winners will be announced on June 17. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more details.
The area of downtown Seattle held by protesters has gotten a bit smaller.
Negotiations between city officials and the protesters have been ongoing for several days now. Those negotiations finally bore fruit, with the city and the protesters agreeing to effectively shrink the Capitol Hill occupied protest zone by about half. Concrete blocks installed by the city are now in place. The perimeter surrounds now the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct. That, of course, is the protesters' prize. They have no intention of giving it up. The Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan indicated again in a statement she, too, has no intention of forcing the issue.
That's Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Seattle. Beijing reporting a slight increase in new cases of the coronavirus as it fights a new outbreak with strict measures aimed at reducing human contact and the chances of a new wave of infections across the country. There are restrictions on crossing city and provincial borders, and hundreds of domestic flights have been canceled from Beijing.
Some neighborhoods in the city are considered high risk and have been put on lockdown. There's an update on that fighter jet crash that killed an American pilot in Europe.
The U.S. pilot who died when his F-15C Eagle crashed into the North Sea off the coast of England has been identified as 27-year-old First Lieutenant Kenneth Allen, known to many as Cage. The Assistant Chief of Weapons and Tactics for the 493rd Fighter Squadron died in a routine training accident Monday morning. The cause of that crash under investigation. Allen, who grew up in Utah, was based at the Royal Air Force's Lakenheath base. He's survived by his parents and his wife of several months, who wrote Cage was her absolute best friend. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Haggadah and Tucumán are now open for takeout and free delivery services in selected locations. For more information, call 479-2652 or 3 or 969-2652. Open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comforts of your own home. They take your favorite local dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Horizon Properties can empathize with individual property owners during this trying time. The last thing you should worry about is collecting rent or sending a repairman to your property. With their web-hosted property management system, Horizon can reach out to tenants, vendors, and owners alike and maintain the current prohibition requirements. Let Horizon Properties take care of it all. Help flatten the curve by remaining safe at home. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792 or visit HorizonPropertiesGuam.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you. The Guam Visitors Bureau and Island Beautification Task Force invite you to come out and join the community on Saturday, June 27th, as we work together to beautify our island. Showtime is at 8 a.m. Let's take a moment to show our island pride, to get up and move towards building a better, safer Guam for our friends, families, and visitors. Learn how you can sign up for a beautification site or donate supplies at GuamVisitorsBureau.com and follow social media pages for updates. Special thanks to the stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, big halftime show that we all have come to know so well and love. And we are now in the second half of today's Tall Tales. Means we are in the second half of this week. Smack dab in the middle of this week. Meaning we only got 2.5 more days of Tall Tales before we go into hibernation again, Real Joe Cruz.
True, sir.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but we'll survive. Okay, next item on the card is Tina versus Emergency. And I guess we're doing pretty well because it has been 6 days since Tina has become aware of an emergency situation that was threatening to public health and safety to such a degree that she would have to waive public hearings on bills. So it's been 6 whole days, but we're really thankful that Tina is looking out for us to waive these public hearing requirements, except for one thing. We like the public hearings. You know, a government that is not as transparent as it could has no business canceling public hearings. If it's really, really an emergency, fine. But an emergency doesn't mean, I got one of my bills that I want to get done. I want to take on the floor tomorrow. That's not an emergency, Tina. Okay, moving on to the next item on the calendar, which is a little bit complicated because it starts out with something quite local and then it shifts to the national scene. And I'm going to use the local part of it as kind of a foundation for what I'm talking about with the national scene. The title and the title on the card here is Titano versus United. And that'll make more sense when I get a little farther into this. This is a story that ran in the Post on June 16. Guam's history connects to the Black Lives Matter movement. Guam history connects to the Black Lives History Matter movement. Many might question why hundreds of us gathered at Chief Kipoa Park and elsewhere on the island to show our solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. The late Martin Luther King Jr. often reminded us in his speeches. Can I have the right kind of music here for this, Real Joe Cruz?
What kind of music, sir?
You know, the solemn, like I'm preaching a sermon. Yeah. Not too loud though. Yeah. A little softer, Real Joe. A little softer. That's better. The late Martin Luther King often reminded us in his speeches and sermons that no man is an island unto themselves. I don't think Martin Luther King, back in Martin Luther King, nobody was woke. Not even Martin Luther King Jr. No man is an island unto themselves. That's great. This is Kelly Marsh, Titano. Each of us is part of something larger, and indeed, there are ways in which the history and people of the Marianas are inextricably intertwined with movements for justice, like Black Lives Matter. When Europeans first made contact with Chamorros in 1521, they brought with them the concept of modern slavery on their ships. Slaves largely of African descent. In 1602, in fact, a Spanish priest noted that residing in the Marianas were blacks, likely former slaves who had been aboard a sunken Spanish vessel. Among Chamorros, they found sanctuary and respite and had no desire to leave. They told that priest in no uncertain terms that Chamorros treated them with more Christianity than the Christian Spanish had. This is something brand new to me. I would really like to find the publication where I could study up on this. Maybe if I went to Mark, Real Joe Cruz. Yeah.
Mark, Marianas Research Center?
Yeah.
Okay. I just got that now.
Spanish censuses through the 1700s continued to note the presence of black community members in the Marianas. By the end of the 1800s, not too long after the Civil War, the United States took Guam from Spain. While there were Americans who stood up for Chamorro and local rights and married into the culture, systems in place within the U.S., such as Jim Crow laws, meant to oppress and restrict opportunities for African Americans and other, quote, non-whites, manifested in Guam in many ways. Manamku, some of whom are still among us, can remember growing up with schools, government, and other occupations and military barracks segregated by race. Bars, restaurants, and movie theaters were also sometimes segregated. My father-in-law, former Speaker Carlos Titano, shared recollections of new U.S.-introduced civic groups refusing to allow non-white members to join. Thus, local civic groups like Young Man's League of Guam were formed, challenging the justice of their exclusion. Prior to and at the beginning of World War II, African Americans, Filipinos, Latinos, and many other non-white groups who joined the Navy to serve and sacrifice for the U.S. were met with a similar system of, here's a key word, oppression, living in segregated quarters and being allowed only to join at the lowest level as cooks or servants. Throughout World War II, movements in the U.S. pushed for opening up general service in the Navy to blacks, as well as the ability to serve as nurses in the women's accepted for volunteer emergency service, or the WAVES. A not well-known fact to many is that at Pearl Harbor, black messman Dory Miller is said to be the first American hero of World War II for shooting down 6 enemy planes during the attack. Due to the system of oppression in place, the quiet heroism and sacrifice of so many went unsung and unrecognized in the war. On Guam, pervasive discrimination and harassment toward black soldiers by whites, similar to behaviors experienced by black Americans before and since, brewed. In what are referred to as the Agana race riots, white Marines opened fire on black soldiers on 2 reported occasions, with 3 black Marines and 1 white Marine killed during other incidents. Fortunately, Walter Francis White of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was part of the investigation of those events on Guam. His involvement ensured that some white soldiers were charged and convicted, and that verdicts of unjustly charged black Marines were overturned. Riots and rebellions, such as what occurred in Hagatna, caused high-ranking Navy officials to conclude that Jim Crow or segregated units were not favorable. This initiated both desegregation and a program for better relations within the Navy, which ended World War II with a policy of integration. Now, I thought Harry Truman did that in 1948. Silly me. As we see this outpouring of support and solidarity in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands for Black Lives Matter, another quote from Martin Luther King resonates so well with this present moment. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. As systems of oppression and histories of injustice can bring us together, so can movements for justice. This is my, now the attribution is Kelly Marsh, PhD, a senator in the 35th Guam legislature. So the most recent event that Kelly Marsh traces here in her column was the end of World War II. That's 1945. And she goes back and historically discovers that the Spanish brought black people, probably slaves, to Guam. So this indicates, going back to the beginning of her column, many might question why hundreds of us gathered at Chief Kupoa Park and elsewhere in the island in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. So, you know, if you want to play the identity politics game, which is obviously what Senator Taitano is doing here, let's play the identity politics game. So the Spanish colonized Guam in Magellan came in 1521, San Vittorius 1662, right? Brought Spanish soldiers with him, And the Spanish soldiers, of course, as she put it with Americans in 1898, married into the local culture, right? So as a result of the Spanish colonization of Guam for 300 years, I look around and I see an awful lot of Spanish surnames. You know, names like Santos, Cruz.
No, sir.
Yeah.
No, it's not. My last name is indigenous, sir.
Your last name is indigenous.
Yes.
Scambulary.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Santos and Cruz.
What about Taitingfong or Talentongu or?
Those are Chinese.
Spanish?
Chinese.
Really?
They are Chinese.
What the heck happened here back in those days?
Yeah. So we've got Santos and Paris and Cruz and an abundance of Spanish. Palomo, for crying out loud. You know, so where were these folks when all of these things were going on? And you compare those names to names like Mosca, Maguaduk, Taitano, Matagolay, Matanguihan, the real...
Matanhagen?
Oh, God. The real Chamorro names. So should we dig that up now, and should we start arguing about who's Chamorro and who's not Chamorro? Should we start beating up on the Spanish because of, you know, their colonial policies, because the Spanish brought slaves to Guam? Well, no, obviously not. That would be silly. But the point I want to make here is that Senator Marsh goes all the way back to events several hundred years ago to revive a little bit of grievance politics here, so that she can play the virtue signaling on Black Lives Matter. See, this is the reason that we're doing it. Now, I have a column that doesn't go into Black Lives Matter per se, but it talks about the country in general. And I see this column that Senator Taitano published in the paper is emblematic of what the author of this column, Matt Walsh, is trying to tell us. And this is what he says: it's time to face the facts. We cannot be united. He says, one of the first articles I wrote for the Daily Wire was typically optimistic and cheerful piece titled, quote, "The United States of America no longer exists." It was not met with a warm reception by many readers who understandably found it to be a tad bleak. 3 years later, it brings me no pleasure to say, I told you so. My basic thesis is that peace, in that peace, was that our country, though existing still as a legal and geographic entity, cannot be meaningfully described as, quote, united. We have nothing but the land and the land holding us together anymore. That's not enough to make a nation or a people. There needs to be something else, some uniting principle, some defining commonality that blinds us, as it were, binds us. If we are going to be united, we must be united around something or by something. Today, all of this holds true, only more so. The key difference between now and 3 years ago is that we no longer have the law. Between the unconstitutional lockdowns and the sudden abandonment of those policies in order to allow rampaging leftist mobs to wreak havoc in the streets for weeks on end, the rule of law has broken down. And with our borders still about as porous as they've ever been, it's hard to say that we are meaningfully united even on a geographical level. With these two pillars crumbling, pillars that were already insufficient in themselves to keep a country together, what's left? Many nations around the world and throughout history have been held together by the bonds of their common heritage, ancestry, language, and tradition. Let me repeat that sentence. Many nations around the world and throughout history have been held together by the bonds of their common heritage, ancestry, language, and tradition. The United States has always been different in this respect, but we once had a language and at least some traditions. Now it's ethnocentric, xenophobic, and racist to expect immigrants to learn the language of the country they're immigrating to. In other words, if you were to say that people who want to immigrate to the United States ought to commit themselves to learning, what language do we speak in the United States now? Which one is it?
Tomorrow, sir?
Yeah. Well, you know, I mentioned this before, but I was, year before last, I was in West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee. And boy, they've really got poor school system there.
Wow.
Yeah, a bad school system because none of the room maids in the hotels could speak Spanish. I don't even know how they got hired. They can't even speak Spanish, you know. Yeah, so anyhow, where was I? Yeah, now if a person says people who want to immigrate to the United States ought to take an effort to learn English, a person who says that is branded as ethnocentric. Ethnocentric, meaning you think your ethnicity is better than the rest. That person would be branded as xenophobic, afraid of foreigners, and racist. I'm not sure I even know what that word means anymore. It's like the word they. I used to know what it means, but I don't think I do anymore. But that would be what would happen. That's how you would be branded if you expect immigrants to learn the language of the country they're immigrating to. As for traditions, our national holidays like Thanksgiving and Columbus Day have been abolished in many quarters, and that trend is rapidly gaining speed. No doubt Memorial Day and Independence Day will be on the chopping block soon enough. We're celebrating our independence?
Wow.
We can't do that.
No, we can't.
And Memorial Day, to memorialize people who were killed in all these wars we've been fighting?
No, we couldn't do that, sir.
These holidays are being torn down along with the statues of our historical icons and politicized like the sporting events that once gave us a respite from the political back and forth. You can't even watch a football or basketball game now without getting, without being politicized by the woke generation. These losses are not insignificant. Healthy, vibrant countries have always had their traditions, holidays, and heroes. Heroes like George Washington. George Washington had slaves. Thomas Jefferson, he was a slaver. We are going to try to be the first country with none of those. I don't think the experiment will prove successful. But the thing that had always made America unique is that it is a nation founded on ideas, on a creed. If nothing else, we were once joined by our shared belief in those ideas and that creed. We have never succeeded in actually applying all of our lofty principles, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with inherent dignity and value, to everyone equally. But we shared them at least on an aspirational level. It's what we wanted to do from the very beginning. It's what we wanted to do. Now we no longer aspire to be that sort of a country. Many Americans fundamentally reject the inherent dignity of human beings, and our ideas of what it means to be, quote, equal are so elementally opposed as to render the term meaningless. I'm going to go to the seventh inning stretch here, and I'm going to finish this screed, and then I'm going to go to Frenchie. And Jimmy, since you've already had 2 rides on the Ferris wheel, you're going to have to wait until after Frenchie.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers put branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
So here we are, 7th inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, Illinois, and being smack dab in the middle of America here in Chicago, I'm going to continue to read this op-ed about the state that our country is in. So I just finished this sentence. Many Americans fundamentally reject the inherent dignity of human beings, and our ideas of what it means to be equal are so elementally opposed as to render the term meaningless. Are we joined by our shared desire to be free? You know, when I was growing up, if I heard this once, I heard it, almost 3 or 4 times a week. America is a free country. This is a free country. And we thought that was really something, that the United States was a free country. Back to the column here. Are we joined by our shared desire to be free? No. In the minds of many, the ultimate vision of freedom is a socialist utopia where the free market is abolished and the government provides all basic needs. To me and many others, this is a vision of slavery, not freedom. It may be true that all Americans talk about freedom and say they want freedom, but the only commonality between the competing views of freedom is the word itself. Can we be bound by our passion for human rights? Again, no. The situation with rights is much like that with freedom. Those on the left, not just the leftist fringes, but the mainstream of the movement, would say that mothers have a, quote, right to kill their offspring. Some Americans have a right to the money and property of other Americans. These would be the looters. Biological males have a, quote, right to access women's locker rooms. Gay couples have a right to the goods and services of Christian business owners, and so on. They see a human right as a claim, always in competition with other rights claims. One right must supersede another. The women's right to autonomy must trounce violently a child's right to live. A college student's right to be free of debt must overpower a wealthy man's right to the fruit of his own labor. What they're really describing is one group's struggle for power and dominance over another. It has nothing to do with rights. Rights are inherent to our human nature. By definition, human rights cannot be in competition with one another. But since we have fundamentally opposing definitions of the term, we can't be united around it. If we cannot be united around tradition, language, or heritage, and we also cannot be united around a shared belief in freedom and human rights, then what's left? We would appear to be already two different countries, or perhaps several countries. Even that may be overly generous way of describing our current state. Really, when a man tells me that he believes babies aren't people, biological sex doesn't exist, men can get pregnant, police departments should be abolished, America is racist to its core, and I'm a white supremacist because I disagree with him on these points, I find myself questioning whether we are on the same planet or the same universe, let alone the same country. That is how absolutely opposed we are on all levels, with almost no common ground or shared frame of reference. It's not hard to see why our debates are fruitless and our conversations go nowhere. We're speaking different languages, both literally and metaphorically. We are a people divided by gaps that cannot be closed. There is no bridge that can connect the left to the right. The differences are too deep, too wide. For unity to occur, one side or the other must simply abandon almost everything they believe and profess and join the ranks of the other. That is not likely to happen anytime soon. So the divisions will remain and grow deeper, and we will be less united over time. I don't know where to go from here or how to fix it, or if it can be fixed at all. But I know that any path forward must begin with an honest assessment of the situation. This is my honest assessment for what it's worth. He says, I can't say that there's much in here that I disagree with. How about you, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
The guy really makes some good points. And Tall Tales is usually the place where people go for answers. I'm going to have to study this one for a little while before I'll be able to come with any answers to this. Of course, the first answer out of my mouth is you got to keep listening to Tall Tales because other outlets are not going to get into these kinds of discussions with you. And as Matt Walsh says, any path forward must begin with an honest assessment of the situation. So that's why I read the Kelly Marsh. You know, when we've got members of our legislature who are going all the way back hundreds of years to find some racial distinctions to make, to tell you why she is supporting Black Lives Matter, it fits right into this exactly correct. You know, how does such an analysis tend to bring us all together? Okay, as promised, I've got our Frenchie. Excuse me, I've got Frenchie doesn't need to be our Frenchie. Frenchie is Frenchie. And then I've got our Carl in the green room waiting for Frenchie. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Bob. How are you?
Good.
Well, so many things to cover. Yeah. I had not read Kelly March Titano column, but it sounds like it was written by Bevacqua, since they all come from the same spot and the same school. I wouldn't be surprised. Bevacqua is not very Chamorro either, right? It's Spanish from Italian origin.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. What is interesting is that the Maoists in the 60s and the 50s had one adjective which was which could apply here very well. It's revisionism. You know, they used to accuse their enemy of revisionism. And it's exactly what she does. You know, she revises history. She picks and chooses little parts, put them out of context, and put them on a pedestal. So what she fails to notice is that the Chamorros themselves were practicing slavery as most of the people of the Pacific used to practice slavery, and it's the colonizer that stopped slavery on the islands. So, you know, they pick and choose what's convenient, and they forget what's inconvenient. So it's not the first time we've seen it. It's a typical Marxist technique, and people fall for it. You know, it's amazing. But what I wanted to talk about was I've been looking and reading a lot. I've been reading two things. I've been doing some research on BLM and where they come from, the financing and all those things. And I've also picked up an old book that I had not read in a while and trying to finish it, which is The Republic of Plato. Very interesting, you know, and I think because it's almost 400 years before Christ, and what he was saying was very interesting. I will quote there for a short while. When fathers are getting used to let their children do as they please, when sons no longer listen for their father's word, when teachers tremble while facing their students and prefer to flatter them, when finally the youth challenge the laws because they no longer recognize any authority over them or anything, then appears in all its use and all its beauty. Excuse me, it's just I'm having a Bob moment here. The beginning of tyranny. So it's so appropriate because it was written basically 2,500 years ago, and it's exactly what we're experiencing right now. It's still the same problems. We have not invented anything, and it's one of the challenges of democracy. You know, liberty, when it's pushed to its extreme, brings tyranny, and we've seen it a lot. We've seen it with the French Revolution. We've seen it with many other occasions, the Soviets and so on. It was based on liberty, but it brought tyranny. So what's very interesting is the sudden apparition of BLM on Guam, and of course the jumping on the bandwagon by the pro-independence movement. And you see white coats for BLM, and we've seen who was at the head of this. And you see where the fundraising of BLM goes. It goes to a website that's run by the Democratic Party. Then you realize that it's really a very good distraction of the record. It is an operation that is meant for people to take their eyes off the problems and look at a manufactured problem. Now, I'm not saying there is not racial inequalities and different levels of treatment, and that we should not endeavor to get better, but we're in an election year, and this thing just appears and then propagates itself throughout the world like wildfire, and we're supposed to think that it is accidental, and it is not. Those are very well manipulated distractions. If you look right away, the PDN and KUAM, who are the mouthpiece of the Democratic Party on Guam, just jump on the bandwagon and push all those narratives like they already knew the scenario, and there is no opposing view that is being asked to say what they want. I saw that other black movement that comes out, they call themselves the ABLM, the All Black Lives Matter, and they are pointing the fact that the BLM just looks for martyr once in a while but ignores all the other black lives that are being ruined, the people that are being assassinated. So it's very interesting. And of course we hear about white privilege, but nobody has been able to explain to me how white Appalachian coal miners are privileged, or poor white farmers in the Midwest are privileged, or the Irish immigrants that had to run away from the colonialism of the British and came here to be drafted by force in the Union forces during the Civil War and marched from slavery all the way to a civil war. Nobody has been able to explain me how that is white privilege and how the children of those people are responsible for slavery during 200 years in North America, which was the actions of a minority. And how do people that fought against slavery, that were white, are responsible for that slavery? There is no explanation, because it's done in order to distract from the real issues. And the real issues is the re-election of Trump, which of course those people do not want, and they'll try any artifacts. And here on the island, we have a small image of this. This distraction arrived at a perfect time for the governor, which was being criticized for the way she spends the money received from the feds, and of course the 19-floor scandals and all its ramifications, and frankly a very bad record so far. I mean, this administration has been inept, like very few other administrations have been inept at almost everything, at every level. And then we look at the legislature, including the Senator Taitano, who is probably one of the worst senators in the history of the legislature here on Guam. So, that was my points. I don't know what you think about that, but basically I see it as a huge distraction and trying to focus our eyes and ears on something else beside the very poor records of the Democrats here on Guam.
Well, as usual, Frenchie, you're right on target here. You've certainly laid it out so that we could understand it pretty completely. And it's not a nice looking picture, is it?
No, it's not. And I was in church last Sunday, so people, there is a lot of things I don't understand. I said, well, a lot of the thing is that there are a lot of very bad actors around. You need to pray a little more to keep those people away from continuing to lead us, because we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, one place where we're ahead of the rest of the country, so many cities now where Black Lives Matter have de facto taken control. The city government has said, we've got to defund our police department. Well, we defunded our police department a long time ago, right?
Yeah, that's true. Here on Guam, we have not given the right money to the police. And if it was not for donations of cars and motorcycles and things, the police department could not operate. It's sad, yeah.
Well, there we are, Frenchie, coming up to the home stretch. And once again, I
All
appreciate
right,
your call.
I'll leave time for Carl to give us his point of view. All right. Thank you.
So long,
Bye-bye.
Frenchie. So let's see here. What I got?
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
This Father's Day, be one of 7 lucky winners of Circle K's Ultimate Father's Day Package. Get a case of tomahawk steak, a bottle of whiskey, a case of beer, and a Bacchus beer bag. That's a $300 value. Purchase $25 or more in fuel, or any 6-pack or more of Miller Lite, Coors Light, or Blue Moon to receive an entry form. Tune in to The Ray Gibson Show on The Point for more ways to win. Winners will be announced on June 17. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, heading down the home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. And I've got R. Carl on the line, and I lost my Stack VIP, Real Joe Cruz, so you got to tell me who I've got on line 2 and line 3.
Line 2 is Jimmy, and line 3 is our Fred.
R. Fred, huh?
Yes,
Well, Jimmy, I'm gonna do Carl first, and then R. Carl, R. Fred, and then Jimmy, if I still got time, Jimmy. Starting out with R. Carl. Good afternoon, R. Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Yeah, I'll try and be as succinct as I can. Before I get to my main point quickly, I just find it ironic that the senator neglected to mention that the party she's a part of is actually the number one cause of slavery lasting as long as it did. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery, and it's the entire reason slavery lasted as long as it did is because they refused to end it. And the Democratic Party, which he is a member of, was the party behind the Jim Crow segregation laws that were so cruel, and they were behind the creation of the paramilitary arm of that party, with the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. And they fought civil rights all the way through almost to the end of the 60s. The Southern Democrats especially were not on board with that. And they are running over 24 failing inner cities across America that entrap millions of young black men and women in failing school systems. These are highly paid administrators that run these cities and run these school systems, and they have failed, and they've done it 50 to 100 years. So I just found that ironic. I'll just make one other quick point. Something that she did not mention is that the irony that slavery was practiced on every inhabited continent on the face of the earth for over 4,000 to 5,000 years of recorded history, and archaeological digs show proof that it was practiced even before there was recorded history. The place where the end of slavery, where slavery began to be dismantled, was in 2 white countries. One of them was Great Britain, because in 1611 the King James Bible was translated into everyday language, and common people began to read the Bible for the first time in history, and at least in an English country. And little by little, they began to understand that people are of equal value before the eyes of God. By the 1700s, the Quakers especially began to push for this dismantling of the slave trade. And once that gained momentum, it was only 50 years during which the international slave trade was dismantled, and it was fought by the Muslims. It was fought in various slave-holding places around the world, and it was so. These slave-holding ships were so fearful of British military frigates approaching them that if they saw them in the distance approaching, they would throw slaves overboard. Some of them they would kill and throw them overboard. Otherwise, they just throw them overboard, because getting caught with slaves by the British military meant hanging. There was no way around that. They would hang the captain and possibly most of his crew. And, of course, this anti-slave movement spread to the British colonies, the 13 colonies, and the early states. And it's the foundation of one of the tenets of our Constitution, that we find that all men are created equal. I forget the exact quote. I'm having a Biden moment. But that's the irony of it, is that these white countries are being attacked when, in fact, that's where the dismantling and the end of slavery began. And slavery is still practiced around the world today. There's over 40 million slaves around the world. Anyway, I've said my rant. I'll let the other two gentlemen try to get a few words in. Thanks a lot.
Well, very well taken, Carl. And, of course, to the woke generation, to the folks that are really woke, those things are not as important as what's called presentism. Presentism means that you must gauge everything that ever happened in light of what you think today's morals are. So if it's not correct today, then if it happened 300 years ago, those people were horrible people. Even though
I don't know why they don't apply that to the party of slavery, the Democratic Party. We're reaching back into history and destroying statues. So since we're going to go back into history, let's do it all the way. Anyway,
yeah,
Bob, thank you very much.
I'm waiting for the cancellation of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the guy that interned, was it 20,000 American citizens who happened to be of Japanese ancestry? He's still a hero to the Democrats. But thanks for calling, Carl. Okay, and then I've got our Fred over here. Our Fred, you're going to take it right down the home stretch.
Hello.
Hello, our Fred.
Hey, how you doing, Bob?
Good.
Well, hey, I was listening to Ray's show this morning, and he brought up that the governor, Clint was on his show, and he brought up that the legislature could end the extension of the public health disaster, whatever you want to call this, public health emergency declaration, and now there's a rumor, or it's in the paper today, that it might be extended for another 30 days. And the legislature can end that by voting against it. And Clint chuckled at it and said, oh, well, we're not really sure about it, and chuckled on that, and just said there's bills and things that they're concentrating on, and not that.
Mr.
I mean, I know you're almost out of time, but just to say, wow. I mean, you know how much the businesses and the employees are already suffering out there. To further extend it means further suffering, which I think I mentioned on your show before. I don't think anyone's listening up there. Yeah, so if you want to shed some light on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll pick that up tomorrow, or Fred, that Mr. Courage thought that there were other priorities that go beyond the fact that the governor has killed our economy.
Yeah, it's practically killed, yeah, you're right.
and severely wounded several members of the population in the process. Good idea, Alfred. Thanks for calling.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow for another exciting episode of Tall Tales. Joey Tovas tells us the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those that speak it. That's from George Orwell. Well, I'm going to keep speaking the truth right here on Tall Tales, so tune in tomorrow.